Before we begin, if you're watching this, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. These stories are real, they're raw, and they're shared by people carrying weight you can't imagine. Let's get into it. I'm a young surgeon. That's the first thing you need to understand about me. Most of my colleagues are older, seasoned, with decades of experience carved into their hands. But me, I pushed through medical school at lightning speed. I rushed into residency. I threw myself into a fellowship where every single decision I make could mean the difference between someone living or dying. People look at me in the operating room and they see confidence. They see talent. Maybe they see someone who has it all figured out. But inside, I'm drowning in inexperience, and that inexperience just killed someone. The patient was a baby girl. She was only a couple of weeks old, a preemie, fragile in every sense of the word, but still alert, still fighting. She was born with a condition so severe that without immediate surgery, she wouldn't survive. Her parents knew this. Every single person in that operating room knew this. Her condition was rare. I had only seen the surgery performed once, just once, in person. But in this field, you don't get endless chances to watch and learn. Eventually, you have to step up. Eventually, you have to be the one holding the scalpel. And my attending, the senior surgeon overseeing me, he decided this was my moment. As I scrubbed in, my heart was already hammering against my ribs. This wasn't like the adult cases I'd handled before. Those felt manageable, predictable. This was different. Her entire chest was barely bigger than my hand. Her heart, no larger than a walnut. Every single movement I made had to be absolutely perfect. There was no room for error. None. At first, it went well. I opened her up carefully. I exposed those tiny structures that needed repair. I assessed everything just like I'd been taught, walking myself through each step, one after another. For just a moment, I let myself believe I could do this. I let myself think I was ready. Then came the cannulation of the aorta. It's a step I'd done several times before on adult hearts. The process was familiar. Make a small incision, insert the cannula, tighten the purse string sutures. Simple in theory. But this wasn't an adult heart. This was a newborn's. The moment I made the incision, blood spurted out. That's normal. That always happens. But this time, the aorta was so small, the tissue so fragile, that everything happened faster than my hands could keep up with. I inserted the cannula, but when I tightened the sutures, they tore right through the tissue. Suddenly, there was blood everywhere. Pause. I tried to recover. I clamped. I suctioned. I tried to control the hemorrhage, but it was already too late. With an adult, you sometimes have seconds to fix your mistake. With her, every fraction of a second was critical, and too many of those seconds had already passed. She had lost too much blood before I could stabilize her. She died on that table. The room went completely quiet except for the mechanical hum of machines and the sound of my own breathing behind my surgical mask. I froze. I was still holding the instruments in my hands. No one in that room said anything for what felt like an eternity. The nurses, the assistants, they weren't entirely sure what had happened, but my attending knew. He knew exactly what I had done. When the surgery was called, I walked out to scrub. I thought maybe I could use that moment to collect myself, to breathe, to process what had just happened. That's when my attending came in. This man I respected deeply. This man whose opinion meant everything to me. He had the most somber expression I'd ever seen on his face. He didn't yell at me. What he said was far worse than any yelling. He looked me straight in the eye and told me that baby's death was my fault, that my bites had been spaced wrong, that my incision had been too large, that I had failed at the single most delicate moment imaginable. At the end of this conversation, he told me I had better learn from this because it could never, ever happen again. There was no comfort in his words, no attempt to soften the blow. It was just the brutal, undeniable truth. My mistakes in that operating room led directly to the death of a child. But the worst part wasn't hearing it from him. The worst part was what came next. I had to stand just feet away while he went to speak with her parents. I stood in the corner of that room as he sat them down and explained that there had been complications, that despite our best efforts, their daughter hadn't made it. If you're still watching, leave a comment below. Have you ever made a mistake you can't take back? How do you live with it? I'll never forget the sound of their cries echoing down the hospital hallway. I'll never forget the way the mother collapsed into her husband's arms. I'll never forget the way he buried his face in his hands, like the weight of the entire world had just crushed him into dust. They had trusted us. They had trusted me with their daughter's life, and I utterly, completely failed them. Since that day, I haven't been able to stop replaying it in my head. Every single moment of that surgery, over and over like some cruel loop I can't escape. I wonder what would have happened if my attending had stepped in sooner, if he had taken over at the crucial moment. But that's not how this works. I was the surgeon that day. The responsibility falls on me. That little girl could have grown up. She could have celebrated birthdays, gone to school, made friends, fallen in love. She should still be alive right now, cradled safely in her parents' arms. But instead, she's gone. And I can't escape the feeling that it's solely because of me. I keep asking myself if I'm really cut out for this. Being a surgeon isn't like most professions. When we make mistakes, people don't just lose money or time, they lose their lives. And no amount of learning, no amount of experience can change the fact that someone had to die for me to gain that knowledge. I wanted this career because I thought saving lives would give my own life meaning. But now, I can't stop wondering if I have the right to keep doing this. If every time I pick up a scalpel, I'm gambling with someone else's future. I don't know if I can forgive myself for what I did. I don't know if I should. Let me tell you about someone who almost didn't make it. Someone who came inches from ending everything. And the strangest part? The person who saved him doesn't even know they did it. This happened nearly a decade ago. At the time, this person was going through one of the darkest periods of their life. Everything felt heavy. Work wasn't going anywhere. They didn't feel like they had any real direction. Every day was a repeat of the one before. Their own personal Groundhog Day. The people around them probably thought they were just stressed or burned out. But inside, they were drowning. They didn't talk about it with anyone. They bottled everything up. They thought it was their responsibility to handle it themselves. That admitting how badly they were struggling was a sign of weakness. They know now how dangerous that mindset is. But at the time, it was all they knew. One night, they got in their car and just started driving. No destination, no plan, just an overwhelming urge to escape their life. Eventually, they ended up at a bridge on the outskirts of town. Looking back, they can't even say if they had a real intention of jumping. Maybe they did. Maybe they just wanted to scare themselves into feeling alive. Or maybe they just wanted to sit there, staring into the void, letting the thought linger. That's what they did. They parked the car, turned off the engine, turned off the lights, and they sat there in complete silence with their thoughts for 30 minutes. They didn't move. They just stared out into the darkness, thinking some of the worst thoughts they'd ever had, thoughts that, even now when they recount them, still make them shudder. It felt like they were getting closer and closer to making a decision. And that's when their phone chimed. It was a text from their girlfriend. Something simple and completely normal. "Are you working overtime tonight? When should I have your dinner ready?" That was it. Those two simple questions absolutely shattered them. They went from sitting there like stone to sobbing so hard they couldn't catch their breath. They kept thinking, how could they have even considered doing something so selfish? How could they think about leaving behind the one person who actually cared about them? Her text reminded them that they mattered. They mattered to her. She was at home, thinking about them, planning dinner, waiting for them to walk through the door like any other normal night. And there they were, parked on the edge of something they might never come back from. They sat there for another half hour, not dwelling in dark thoughts anymore, just trying to pull themselves together. Eventually, they drove home. When they walked in, there she was, smiling like nothing was wrong. Dinner was on the table. They remember that they'd never had a plate of pork chops, vegetables, and rice taste so delicious in their entire life. They hugged her like they'd never hugged anyone before. They couldn't stop holding her. They don't think she realized why, but that night, that hug was their way of silently saying, "Thank you for saving me." If you found this story powerful, hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. That plate of food wasn't just dinner. It was proof that someone loved them enough to want them home. Life moved on from there. A few years later, they proposed to her. She said yes. And every single day since, they've woken up beside her feeling like they won the lottery. She has no idea how close she came to losing them before they even had a chance to build a future together. They've never told her. She knows they were going through a rough time back then, but she doesn't know how deep it went. She doesn't know about the bridge. She thinks they were working overtime that night. The truth is, they don't think they'll ever tell her. Not because they're ashamed, but because she has her own battles to fight. She's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and already carries enough on her shoulders. They don't want to add another weight for her to bear. They figure the least they can do is be the one who carries this secret. They go with her to therapy every week and wait in the lobby while she talks with her counselor. They've read countless books and articles about bipolar disorder, trying to understand what she goes through and how best to support her. It feels like the smallest thing they can do in return for the gift she gave them without even knowing it. Sometimes, late at night, they still think back to that moment on the bridge. How such a simple text, just a reminder that someone cared, pulled them back from the edge. They can't help but wonder how many other people out there have been in that same position, waiting for some kind of sign, a reason to turn their car around and go home. That's why I'm sharing this story now, because the truth is, it doesn't take a grand gesture to make a difference in someone's life. Sometimes it's the smallest acts of love that save people. A question, a hug, a plate of dinner waiting on the table. We don't always get to know what battles the people around us are fighting. We don't always see the darkness they carry. But what we can do is choose kindness. We can reach out, ask questions, check in, remind the people we love that they matter to us. Because you never know, the difference between someone staying and someone leaving could come down to one simple moment of love. This person's wife saved them with a text message she doesn't even remember sending. That's how powerful love can be. Let me tell you about something that happened at a funeral, something that still haunts the person who did it. This person's mother used to go to funerals at her church for elderly people with no remaining family, or for unidentified homeless people. They're not particularly religious as an adult, but they try to continue their mother's legacy of good deeds by attending funerals when there's no one else. Usually not more than once or twice a year, because that's about all they can emotionally handle. They were at one a few weeks ago for a retirement home resident who had no remaining family. There were only 4 or 5 people there, mostly church couples. All of them would have been strangers to the deceased woman. There was a biblical reading. They prayed. About 15 minutes into the service, a young man came running in, crying. He told the pastor he was sorry he was late, but he had only just been contacted that morning and he wanted to say a few words. He gave a tearful, heart-wrenching eulogy about how he couldn't believe he'd let himself lose touch with his mother, that they'd always had a turbulent relationship and eventually grew estranged. But when he got the phone call this morning about his mother's death, it hit him that it had been a full 6 years since they'd spoken. He only wished he could have been the bigger man. The especially troubling thing was, he kept saying things like, "As most of you probably know, my mother was an avid reader," or, as she may have mentioned, "Our family dynamic was never the same after Pop died." And the person telling this story came to an uneasy realization. He thought everyone there was friends of hers. He had no idea they were all complete strangers, attending out of duty or pity. So he sits down and whispers to the pastor, "How many other speakers are there?" And this poor pastor is faced with a terrible task of having to reveal that his mother evidently died without any friends. The pastor just says, "There are no more." He's clearly searching for the words to break this to the guy when he cuts him off and says, "Of course, I'm sorry I was so late. I never called the home to update my contact info after I got out of the service, and I was in Canada for work when they finally got a hold of me." He said he really wanted to talk to the pastor more after the service. So they said the closing prayer, and that was that. The young man started asking the pastor questions about how involved his mother was in church life. Then one of the women, not realizing this conversation was going on, announced at the podium that everyone should filter into the main lobby for light refreshments. Nobody wanted to be the one who had to explicitly state They were just there out of duty or pity. So people lined up, received the son, offered condolences, but then everyone rushed out without even stopping for a cookie. He tried to stop people leaving. He asked them questions, but they were too quick. The person telling this story couldn't bear it. It was all too emotional. They'd never experienced anything like this at one of these funerals, so they did something they still regret. Before I continue, if you haven't already, please subscribe. These stories need to be heard. They walked over to him and said, "I'm so sorry. Your mother's loss hit me very hard. I have to say, I wasn't sure you'd come." As the words were escaping their mouth, their head was screaming, "What are you doing? Shut up." But his face lit up and he said, "Please, can you sit down for a minute? I have a lot of questions." They quickly qualified that they weren't terribly close to his mother, but he said that didn't matter. He was just glad his mother had some people in her life because she'd always had a hard time making friends. He couldn't understand why she'd want to move out here, apparently a couple states away from where she'd lived her adult life. He then launched into his whole life story. He said, "I don't know how much my mother has told you." And they said, "Not too much. She was pretty introspective, you know, trying to say things that felt personal, but were vague enough to be universally applicable." He explained that he was adopted by his mother, and he wasn't surprised they didn't realize it, because she always treated him the same as her biological son. Her biological son was killed in war. It took a hard toll on her and her husband, and then her husband died of a heart attack just a couple of years later. There was a whole lot intertwined in the family dynamic. The mother blamed the father for their son's death because he'd encouraged him to enlist. The mother and the adopted son had a massive falling out when he also decided to enlist in honor of his brother. He said he felt horrible for not trying harder to mend fences. The person telling this story just wanted to give this guy the closure that would never really exist. So they said, "You shouldn't feel bad at all. She loved you, she missed you, and she felt that after everything the two of you had been through together, she wanted to give you space to live your own life." She never went into much detail about what happened after your father passed, but hearing the full explanation makes it all make sense. He was so emotional. He was crying. "Really? She missed me? She talked about me?" And they said, "Of course she did. She was so proud of you. She'd tell everyone who would listen that you were out protecting the country and you were an officer. But it was hard on her too. Every time there was news of a military death, she'd stop whatever she was doing and just be glued to the TV, praying it wasn't you or someone you knew." The guy was openly sobbing at this point. He asked general questions about what she was like in her last few years, what she did during the day. They tried to stick to the vaguely applicable but memorable theme. They said she played board games. She watched the news. He asked if she was still conservative. They said she was still deciding what to think, since the Republican Party had changed so much since her youth. They made up favorite foods, favorite songs. Said she loved Ariana Grande's music until she saw how promiscuously she dressed. Said she loved the therapy dogs that would visit the home. At the end of all of this, he thanked them profusely. They talked about what to do with the body. Everything he said was logistically easy for him. "I was thinking of cremation so I could keep an urn and talk to her without having to drive to a cemetery." Or, "I wonder if she'd want to stay here, or if she'd be okay being taken back." The person just said they thought that's definitely what she would have wanted for all of it. He asked if she had a favorite flower, because the funeral happened to have purple roses and baby's breath, and the church usually just buys whatever's on sale at the florist. They told him she loved baby's breath. He said he'd always keep a vase of them by the urn and thank them again. They said, "You should know she didn't blame you, so don't blame yourself." They figured if there was more that he wasn't saying, that he could look back and assume they meant it about whatever thing was bothering him. So he leaves to go make arrangements for the body, and the pastor says, "What were you thinking? What happens if he meets someone who actually knew his mother, and this interaction creeps him out for the rest of his life? Or worse, what if he finds out she didn't really love or support, or even talk about him, and he's crushed?" So now, this person feels terrible, like they just sent a ticking time bomb off into the world. They're racked with guilt and just had to confess this somewhere. Looking back, they can admit it was reckless to say what they did. But in that moment, it felt impossible to just walk away. This man was so raw and desperate for something to hold on to that they couldn't bear the thought of leaving him with silence. Maybe they crossed a line. Maybe they made a mistake. But if they were faced with the same situation again, they honestly don't think they would do it any differently. Leave a comment. Was this the right thing to do? Or did they make it worse? Now let me tell you about betrayal, about choices that destroy families, about a man who threw away everything for someone he met in an online game. This person cheated on his wife of 10 years. He left her and their 2 children for someone he met online in an MMO. If he's being honest, that first sentence is a perfect encapsulation of his confession. But the actual story goes much deeper. He did a tour in the US Army. While in service, he busted 2 vertebrae and had some serious nerve damage. He was discharged. Fast forward 2 years of drinking and being seriously depressed after his tour. He was out of money, no job, generally doing nothing with his life. He met a group of cool modern hippies, Wiccans, alternative lifestylers. He made friends with a bunch of them. There was this one woman there who just absolutely hated his guts. She couldn't stand him, said he was too polite, too nice, always had something nasty to say to him. Well, a few months passed, and he hooked up casually with some of the women in this group. Started feeling like he was fitting in. Still seriously depressed though, still drinking, but gradually pulling himself out of the nosedive. He got a job, got a place. By all accounts, he was doing pretty well. He even started being friends with the mean woman. Turned out she was rather cool, older than him a bit, previously married, but cool. She had a great kid. He even liked the kid. That's when they started sleeping together. Not because he really felt anything, just sex. A couple months passed, and the place he was working at closed. No job, no money, nowhere to go. The woman asked him to move in. He did. Figured since they were sleeping together, he could sleep over, right? Not really a bad deal. He had some money from disability from the Army. He helped her pay off her place with a VA loan. She was really grateful. A month or so later, he came in from hanging with some guys and found her crying on the couch. He couldn't figure out why on his own. So after a long conversation, she confessed that she was in love with him. He had no idea what to say, so he just said he loved her too. Fast forward 3 years. Things had been terrible financially. On and off jobs, small town, lots of stress, tons of fighting. His now wife was starting to say some really nasty stuff to him daily. He didn't like arguing. It had never been his thing. But it was getting to the point where he felt like she was actually goading him into hitting her. He finally had enough. He made plans to leave her. That's when he found out she was pregnant. His heart sank. All he could do was bite the bullet, do the right thing, and stay with her. Things did get better for a while. They bought a house. He opened a business. They had a beautiful baby boy. He even took some classes at the local college. He came to love her son as his own flesh and blood. He was actually doing pretty well emotionally at this point. But then he found an MMO, this online game where people role-played. So he tried it out. He got into the role-playing scene and started having some serious fun. Other than his kids, this was pretty much the only thing he had going on. While in the game, he got into some serious role-playing storylines with another player. They started talking out of character, got to know each other very well. She was married, having similar marriage issues as him. They had a lot of common interests and really seemed to get along. They ended up talking for 3 to 4 hours at a time, even longer on weekends. He started having feelings for this person, real feelings, those fluttery, bouncy feelings. And he had no idea what to do with them. Until later, he thought he was having small heart attacks or something. Emotionally, he skyrocketed out of his depression. He started listening to music, wanted to dance, generally more upbeat. He started wanting to go out more, hit the bars, play pool. His wife noticed, and they got into a huge fight. She said his happiness made her skin crawl. This led to 2 weeks of constant hell. Every day, it was the same old familiar fight. A week or so later, the person he met online asked him to meet her in real life. He thought, I can't stand what's going on right now. I'm going to rip someone's head off. Yeah, I could use a vacation. He had no idea what feelings he had for this woman. He wasn't exactly what you'd call emotionally self-aware. So he drove 3 hours to meet her at her family's ranch house. They had a nice private meal, talked about things, got into nature, walked in the woods. He felt seriously at peace. All his pressures just slid off his back, and he was happy as he could be. Night came, and they were inside still talking. They got tired, and there was a futon. They both just kind of laid down and cuddled up. And as they say, one thing led to another. The weekend was amazing. He'd never felt like that with anyone. Everything was absolutely perfect. He didn't even feel any guilt about cheating. Time came, and he had to go home. Apparently, he was out of service range for his cell, so he started getting serious text message spam on the drive back. Lots of mean, nasty messages from his wife. At the end, he found out she'd sent his stuff over to his mother's house and was kicking him out. All he could muster was a shrug. He realized then that he didn't give a damn. The next 2 weeks were crazy. Couch surfing at his mom's. Didn't say anything about his weekend. Didn't tell anyone, actually. His wife kept calling to tear him a new one. She told him she'd gone out and hooked up with a guy, but at that point, he wasn't even sure he cared. If you're still here, hit that like button and subscribe. The story gets darker. He made a complete 180 in his own situation because he couldn't stand to live another 24 hours in the state he was in. Now that it's all in the rear view, he can't imagine doing things any differently. The only thing that gets him is staying in his previous life for far too long. But not everyone gets a second chance. Not everyone gets to walk away from their mistakes. Let me tell you about a mother who can't. She's never spoken about this to anyone. Not in 2 decades. But now she's facing the life-changing decision she made when her younger daughter, let's call her Janie, almost died. She's a little over 40 years old now. She married young, had kids young. She considered it, but neither she nor her husband Matthew wanted to abort children conceived within a loving marriage. So they kept the pregnancies. She had her eldest daughter Molly, 11 months after marriage. To make it all work, she dropped out of her master's program, and her husband took another job while going to school full-time. Her pregnancy with Molly was very difficult. She was far away from home and her parents. She didn't have many friends. Her husband's family hated her. She had severe postpartum depression after Molly. She would go on to give birth to Janie 13 months later. You'd think they'd have learned to be more cautious after the first unexpected baby. But there they were. Janie's pregnancy was better, but it was a difficult birth. Her umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck. By the time the doctors realized it, she was too far into labor to be rushed in for a C-section. Janie came out frail and completely blue, but she was healthy, and that's what mattered. 2 difficult pregnancies so close together had really wrecked her body. She was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally too. She had no support system. Matt was always working or in class. He didn't have the capacity to be there for her physically or emotionally. He simply didn't have time to listen to what she was going through. One evening, about a month after they brought Janie home from the hospital, she was sleeping in her crib. Matt was at his desk working. She was in the bathroom, giving Molly a bath. She heard Janie starting to cry and figured Matt, who was in the room with her, would hold her. She heard her crying for a few more minutes still. She was getting ready to wrap up Molly's bath. She knew she'd be able to check on Janie in just a moment. Then she heard Janie shriek. She quickly lifted Molly out of the tub and wrapped her in a towel. Matt was in the living room holding Janie against him. His face was totally blanched. Janie had stopped crying. When she asked what had happened, he lied and said she was fine. But she wasn't fine. A mother knows. She took Janie from him and examined her. She found a massive bruise forming on the side of Janie's head. She asked again what happened. He said she must have hit her head on the crib somehow, but the story didn't make sense. The crib was padded. How could she have gotten such a bad bruise? She took Janie to the emergency room. The doctors examined her. They asked questions, careful questions, questions about how the injury happened. She repeated what her husband had told her. They didn't seem convinced, but they couldn't prove anything. Janie was released with instructions to monitor her closely. When they got home, she confronted her husband again. This time, he broke down. He admitted that he'd been frustrated. The baby wouldn't stop crying. He was trying to work. He was stressed about school, about money, about everything. He picked Janie up out of her crib, and he shook her. He shook her hard. The confession hung in the air between them like poison. He shook their baby. He could have killed her. He could have caused permanent brain damage. And then he lied about it. She told him to leave. He left. For weeks, she was alone with the girls, trying to figure out what to do, how to move forward. She was terrified, overwhelmed. Her family was far away. She had no support system, no job, no money of her own. She was completely dependent on her husband financially, and she made a choice. A choice she's regretted every single day since. She let him come back. She convinced herself it was for the girls, that they needed their father, that he was sorry, that it would never happen again. She told herself she was doing the right thing. But Janie never forgot. Even though she was too young to remember consciously, something in her knew. As she grew up, she was different around her father. Distant, wary. The relationship was always strained. When Janie was a teenager, the truth came out. Her mother doesn't know how. Maybe Molly said something. Maybe Janie pieced it together from fragments of overheard conversations. But one day, Janie confronted them both. She asked her mother, "Did he hurt me when I was a baby?" And her mother couldn't lie. Not anymore. She told her the truth. She told her what her father had done. And she told her she'd let him come back anyway. Janie looked at her mother with tears streaming down her face and said, "You knew. You knew what he did, and you let him stay. You chose him over me." She tried to explain, tried to make her daughter understand the impossible position she'd been in. The fear, the lack of options, the belief that it was better for the girls to have a father. But Janie didn't want to hear it. Janie cut them off, both of them. She found full-time work somewhere, changed her cell phone number, sold the car they'd given her and sent them back the money, changed banks, took herself off their health insurance, refused to tell them her new address. She's still close with her sister Molly. Whenever this mother asks, Molly tells her how Janie's doing. It's very painful for Molly to have to keep her sister's secrets all these years. This mother doesn't blame Janie for being angry. She thinks she's more angry at herself than Janie is angry at them. She's become desperate for the first time since she was a child. She's gone back to church. She prays that her daughter will call her one day. These days, she tortures herself by looking through Janie's baby pictures. Years and years ago, she thought her biggest regret was giving up her master's degree. Now her biggest regret is failing to protect her baby girl, her lovely, beautiful Janie. She reunited with her husband not for her benefit, but because she believed it would be better for both her daughters. Other than this terrible instance when he hurt Janie and lied about it, he was a kind father. Like her, she believes he spent many years suffering in silence. She truly believes he was sorry, despite the fact that he has serious flaws that mean he's unable to face what he did because of his shame. She came back because she thought about whether it was better for her children to grow up with a father who she knew loved them, or without a father figure, or worse, with a father figure who might never love them as his own. She felt it was lose-lose. If she had left, they might have grown up resenting her for not having a dad in their lives. She was told Janie would be fine. She wanted to believe it. She had no way of knowing her daughter would suffer more later on. She regrets everything every day. These stories are heavy. If you've made it this far, you're one of the real ones. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. Let me tell you about addiction, about the kind of choices that destroy not just yourself, but everyone around you, about someone who used women, manipulated them, and nearly got someone killed because of it. This person was heavily into drugs, not just casual use, heavy use, cocaine, OxyContin, Xanax, whatever they could get their hands on. They needed money constantly to feed their habit, and they found a way to get it. They would meet women, usually through friends or at parties. They'd charm them, make them feel special, make them think there was a real connection. Then they'd sleep with them, and after, they'd ask if they could borrow some money, just a little. They'd pay it back soon, promise. Most of the time, the women would give it to them, sometimes $20, sometimes $50, sometimes $100. They never paid it back. They'd just move on to the next woman. It was a system, a terrible, manipulative system. And it worked. Their younger sisters started doing the same thing, following their example, meeting guys, sleeping with them, taking their money. They taught her how to do it, how to play the game. They were proud of it at the time, proud of how clever they were. One night, they had a date set up with a woman named Mary. They'd met her through their dealer. The dealer said she was down for whatever, that she liked to party. They met at a cheap motel. She seemed nice, a little nervous, but nice. They did some drugs together, a lot of drugs. Things started getting hazy. They remember bits and pieces, laughing, music, more drugs, then nothing, complete blackness. They woke up in a hospital 3 days later. Their head was pounding. Their body felt like it had been run over by a truck. They were covered in bruises. A nurse told them they'd been found unconscious in that motel room, severely beaten, overdosed. They spent the next few days in the hospital being treated for a variety of things. A concussion that required drilling a hole in their skull, broken ribs, a broken hand that never quite healed correctly, and withdrawal from all the drugs they were on. When the police spoke with them, they refused to answer questions until the police asked if they knew their friend Mary had been assaulted as well. They remember feeling, and still feel, the shame of realizing they'd never even considered what happened to her. Turns out, she'd been violently raped while they were unconscious. They beat her badly, too. They think that's the first time they honestly felt guilt about what they'd been doing for the last few years. Not even their sister getting arrested had been enough to make them realize what a terrible person they'd been. But being shown pictures of Mary's face, all swollen and bruised, made them cry like a child. They told police everything about their dealer and how he'd set up the date with Mary that night. But nothing ever came of it. The dealer kept his mouth shut. Even though they raided his home, they only found a little weed, no money, no guns, no heavy drugs. All he got was a slap on the wrist. They cleaned up after that. They've been drug-free for over 5 years now. But Mary, last they heard, is still a heavy user. Their sister got clean and is now in college, but she's had a string of abusive boyfriends, and they know that's probably their fault. They were her big brother or sister. They taught her that people only wanted her for one thing. She's had a hard time unlearning that lesson. The other women they manipulated and stole from, they barely even remember most of them. And they're far too much of a coward to try to track them down and apologize. These are the stories people carry with them. The regrets that eat at them every single day. The choices they can't take back. The damage they can't undo. We all make mistakes. Some of us make mistakes that cost lives. Some of us make mistakes that destroy families. Some of us make mistakes that hurt people we'll never be able to apologize to. But here's what I want you to take away from this. These people are living with their choices every single day, and most of them would do anything to go back and change what they did. But they can't. None of us can go back. What we can do is learn. We can recognize when we're heading down a dark path. We can reach out for help before it's too late. We can choose to be honest instead of lying. We can choose to protect the people who depend on us. We can choose kindness over cruelty. If you're watching this and you're struggling with something, please talk to someone. If you're carrying a secret that's eating you alive, find someone safe to tell. If you're making choices you know are wrong, stop before it's too late. Because the people in these stories, they're living proof that you can't outrun your mistakes. They follow you. They haunt you. They change who you are forever. If this video affected you, leave a comment. Share your thoughts. Have you ever carried a regret like this? How did you move forward? And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. These stories matter. They're real. They're raw. They're the things people whisper in the dark when they think no one's listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to these confessions without judgment. Remember, we're all human. We all make mistakes. The question is, what do we do with them after? Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And I'll see you in the next one.